The Hawk That Dare Not Hunt by Day by Scott Odell. Chapter 7. Master Tyndale came aboard that evening shortly after supper. I had already spoken to my uncle and told him that Tyndale wished passage to Hamburg. I had spoken in a most persuasive tone, emboldened by the knowledge that Tyndale, once in Hamburg, could greatly help me by putting me in touch with Luther's printings. My purchase of the Star of India depended, I told myself, upon transporting Master Tyndale to Hamburg. But nothing I had said could change Uncle Jack's rule against permitting passengers aboard this ship, even so few as one. I shifted then to the possibility of hiring Tyndale as a member of the crew. This also failed. It was not until I mentioned that Tyndale was a preacher that in fact I had heard him preach at St. Dunstan's, and that, moreover, he was a staunch follower of the German firebrand, that my uncle showed any interest. I sent a messenger for Tyndale forthwith, and 2 hours later he came alongside in a hired wherry. Fearing that if I called my uncle he would appear on deck in a sulky mood, the two men would then shout at each other over the distance of half a ship's length, and the meeting would end in failure. So I let down our rope ladder and, without calling my uncle, beckoned the man aboard. I was pleased that I had not called my uncle on deck, for Tyndale missed the first rung, doused 1 foot in the river, and came up crab-like and out of breath, in a landlubberly manner that would have made Uncle Jack laugh. I led him off to my uncle's cabin where, the day being chilled, there was a peat fire burning in the small grate. The two men were a startling contrast to the eye. My uncle had to stoop to keep from bumping his head on the carlings, and had an enormous black beard attached to a great bald shining head. The other was so short, so thin, so small of bone and marrow, that well he could have been made from the spare pieces left over from the fashioning of Uncle Jack. It was my intent to remain with the two of them in the cabin, to steer the conversation along the right path, should it falter. But without ceremony or apology, my uncle closed the door in my face. Hoping to overhear a word or two, I hung about, and after a while did hear my uncle shout, "The answer for such mouths is a fist that brings blood to the nose." And in a quieter tone, Tyndale replied, "That sounds like Martin Luther." "It is such," answered my Uncle Jack. Thereafter I heard no more, since I had to leave my post and go forward to see to the lanterns, which someone had forgotten to light. When I was returning to the cabin, Tyndale emerged, and, without a word or glance in my direction, descended the ladder in his crab-like fashion, and was rowed away. With sinking heart I watched him go, certain that my plans had failed. I felt a heavy but friendly hand upon my shoulder. "He'll be coming back," Uncle Jack said. "He'll be traveling with us, praise the Lord." "Hurrah!" I exclaimed, watching the wherry disappear into the night. "Hurrah for Hamburg!" Uncle Jack said, "A boisterous young man, this Master Tyndale, learned in many languages, Hebrew and Greek and Latin, German, French and Spanish, and Italian, and more perchance. I swear I've never heard of such before. He's translating the Bible, the New Testament, but he can't finish the work here, nor bring it to publication because of Henry's laws. Where he's going, they're of the Lutheran faith. He'll be safe there, praise the Lord." "He'll print Bibles in English?" I said, scarcely trusting my ears. "Bibles in the King's English, Bibles for England," Uncle Jack said. "Think on it, eh?" 3 of the crew had come up and were standing now against the rail within earshot, their eyes on the disappearing wherry. Uncle Jack gave me a nudge, and I followed him into the roundhouse. The peat fire was smoking badly, and so he left the door ajar. We stood peering at each other through the smoke. Tyndale plans to make a printing of 5,000 copies of his translation, he said, lowering his voice. 5,000, I exclaimed. Visions of Bibles by the shipload, money by the barrel exploding in my brain. I have agreed to see that the Bibles get to England, he said. We'll bring them here as fast as they're ever printed. I haven't worked on just how, but we'll get them here. To London, eh? It's against the king's law, I reminded him. We can swing for it. Not you, nephew, not you, but I want to share the work and the dangers. Pausing, I added. And the profits too, Uncle Jack. We'll make not so much as you might think, nephew, but I could tell by the glint in his eyes that he was planning upon a handsome profit. Why else would he undertake such a hazardous scheme? I was puzzled. With all the costs of printing the books and our profits added to that, how could Tyndale ever make enough to pay him for his trouble? Uncle Jack stooped, picked up the poker, and stirred the fire. Then he thrust the poker to me as if to emphasize his words. Master Tyndale risks his life so that all England can read the Bible, he said. Now there are few who can because they cannot read Latin, in which the Bible is printed. I recall what Tyndale had said as he left these quarters, and these are his own words. I want to translate the Bible into English so that every plowboy can read it. Every plowboy, mind you, and even you, Master Tom Barton, can then read it. Once you learn to read, eh? My father and mother were God-fearing people who had died of the plague in the bad summer of 1520. Thereafter, I left home and went to sea, and perforce was influenced more by the ways of the world than by their devout beliefs. My uncle's influence during the 4 years of my service on his ship had tended to discourage me in religious matters, and in my education as well. Uncle Jack still had the hot poker pointed at me. I'll read the Bible that Master Tyndale translates, I said, and ponder it. And ponder it, I agreed. Praise the Lord, said Uncle Jack, but there was a hollow sound to his words. I had heard it oft before. It came when he said in his deepest voice, praise the Lord. He was not, I was certain, as interested in my pondering the Bible as he was in the tidy profit that the books would bring. End of chapter 7.